Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're heading back to ancient Rome.
Always a good time for a little Roman Empire.
Right. And we're going right to the source for this one, Edward Gibbon's classic, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire.
Classic for sure.
We're going to be unpacking a story about power, intrigue, and just how fragile even the mightiest empires can be.
Sounds intriguing already.
We're diving into the reign of Commodus, the emperor who inherited the throne from his father, the philosopher emperor Marcus Aurelius. You'd think that would be a recipe for success, having Marcus Aurelius as your dad.
You'd think so, right? I mean, talk about a role model. But Gibbon actually portrays a really fascinating dynamic between them, almost like Commodus was Aurelius's blind spot. I mean, here's this emperor known for wisdom, for stoic virtue, and his own son becomes one of Rome's most notorious emperors. Makes you think about the whole nature versus nurture debate, doesn't it? The weight of legacy and all that.
It really does. So let's talk about Commodus before he became emperor. I mean, was he always destined to be a tyrant? What does Gibbon say about his early life?
Well, what I find really interesting is that Gibbon kind of suggests that Commodus wasn't, like, inherently a bad guy from the start. He describes the young Commodus as actually being pretty innocent.
Really? Innocent?
Yeah, relatively innocent. But, you know, and as we all know, when there's a power vacuum, certain personalities, they have a way of filling it. And the influences around someone, especially a young, impressionable future emperor, they can be really powerful.
Oh, absolutely. Power and influence, especially in ancient Rome. Talk about a dangerous combination. So does Gibbon point to a specific turning point in Commodus's life? Some event that set him down this darker path?
Well, it's almost like a scene ripped right out of a play, a pivotal moment that changes everything. Commodus is the target of an assassination attempt.
Wow.
And while he manages to escape physically unharmed, you can only imagine the psychological impact of something like that, especially on someone so young.
Oh, yeah. It makes total sense. I mean, that kind of trauma could easily lead to paranoia, distrust. You'd start seeing threats everywhere.
Exactly. And Gibbon really drives this point home, how this one event really transformed Commodus. He became increasingly isolated, suspicious of everyone around him, and as his grip on reality kind of loosened, his reign really descended into excess and cruelty.
And that leads us to the whole gladiator obsession, something Gibbon really focuses on. It was more than just a hobby for Commodus, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, way more. This wasn't just an emperor enjoying the games from the sidelines. Commodus actually entered the arena himself. He even participated in gladiatorial combat, which, by the way, would have been seen as completely scandalous. The Roman people, they expected their leader to be above that sort of thing. They wanted a symbol of power and authority, not a showman covered in, dust and blood.
So by being down in the arena, Commodus wasn't just indulging some personal obsession. He was really undermining the whole idea of what it meant to be emperor.
Exactly. And Gibbon seems to be arguing that this was kind of a symptom of a larger issue within Roman society at the time, like this weird fascination with spectacle and violence that ultimately weakened the empire from the inside out.
It makes you wonder, was Commodus trying to prove something? Maybe overcompensate for his insecurities? Or was it more calculated, like a way to control the masses through fear and awe?
That's the million-dollar question that still fascinates historians today. But regardless of his reasons, Gibbon makes it very clear that Commodus's actions had a huge impact on Rome. His actions set the stage for a period of massive instability and ultimately, of course, his own dramatic downfall.
It's hard to picture an emperor like Commodus just peacefully riding off into the sunset. So how does his reign finally end?
Yeah, you'd expect some dramatic ending, a massive uprising maybe.
Yeah.
But Gibbon says it was actually much more behind the scenes. Commodus's reign ends not with a bang, but with a whisper. A conspiracy from inside his own inner circle.
Intrigue and betrayal. Classic Roman Empire. You have to wonder, what would make those closest to Commodus turn against him like that?
Well, Gibbon seems to think it was a combination of fear and self-preservation.
Yeah.
Don't forget, Commodus had become incredibly erratic, paranoid.
Right.
Anyone could have been his next target.
Right. Dangerous time.
Exactly. And one of the people who decided to take action was Marcia, one of his concubines.
Oh, okay.
She's a really interesting character in this whole thing. Gibbon portrays her as recognizing the precarious position they were all in. So she becomes a central figure in this plot to get rid of Commodus.
Wow, Marcia, a concubine who helped take down an emperor. Talk about making history. So Commodus is out. Who fills the power vacuum? Who steps up to be emperor next?
And this is where it gets really interesting. Gibbon introduces us to Pertinax, who becomes emperor almost by accident. And he's the polar opposite of the ruler he replaced. Imagine going from an emperor who's obsessed with gladiatorial combat to one who embodies experience, integrity, a desire for a just rule. What a change.
It's night and day. So while Commodus is busy battling imaginary beasts in the arena, Pertinax is like the seasoned leader waiting in the wings. What were some of the first things he did as emperor? Did he try to undo some of the damage from Commodus's reign?
Oh, absolutely. Gibbon talks about how Pertinax immediately starts reforming all the excesses of the previous regime.
Yeah.
He auctions off Commodus's lavish stuff, all his possessions, refuses fancy titles for his own family. He really makes it clear that his priority is the needs of the Roman people.
I bet the citizens were breathing a sigh of relief after years of extravagance and fear under Commodus.
I know, right?
It makes you wonder if, deep down, Pertinax kind of felt like he was cleaning up a teenager's mess. But you mentioned earlier that Pertinax, even with all the good intentions, had a pretty short reign. What happened there? I mean, you would think an emperor who restores order and justice would be universally welcomed, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? And this is where Gibbon points out this tragic irony. It was Pertinax's dedication to reform, his unwavering commitment to justice, that actually led to his downfall.
So wait, let me get this straight. The emperor who's actually trying to do some good, to bring back order and justice, he's the one who ends up facing the most opposition. That feels like a pattern we've seen repeated throughout history, doesn't it?
Sadly, yeah, it does. Gibbon really wants to drive home this point, that reform, especially in a system as deeply rooted as the Roman Empire, well, it creates its own kind of instability. Think about it. Pertinax, with all of his changes, he made some powerful enemies along the way. These were people who were directly benefiting from all the corruption and chaos of Commodus's rule.
It's like that old saying, no good deed goes unpunished, right? Especially back in ancient Rome. So who were these powerful enemies that Pertinax managed to make so quickly?
Well, this is where Gibbon throws in another twist. The most shocking part he reveals is the role of the Praetorian Guard. Now remember, these were supposed to be the emperor's protectors. They swore an oath to defend him with their lives.
Hold on, you're saying the very people who were supposed to be protecting Pertinax, they turned against him. Why would they go to such extremes? What was in it for them?
Power and corruption, it always comes back to that. See, what Gibbon highlights here is that the Praetorian Guard, under Commodus, they'd gotten used to a certain level of influence, a certain lifestyle too. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They had to become kingmakers. And Pertinax, with all of his reforms, well, he was threatening their entire way of life.
Because he was taking away their power.
Exactly.
So they saw a chance to hold on to their own privilege, and they took it. That's a dark picture Gibbon paints of the Roman Empire. To think that even the most elite forces weren't immune to corruption.
It really is. And honestly, that's something Gibbon never shies away from exposing those hard truths. The story of Pertinax, it's not just about one man's good intentions being met with violence. It goes deeper than that. It lays bare the rot within a system that had become more concerned with self-preservation, with personal gain, than the good of the empire itself.
It really gets you thinking about those big, overarching themes that Gibbon was grappling with. Even an empire as vast and as powerful as Rome, its stability was surprisingly fragile.
And that's the chilling reality Gibbon presents. The personal flaws of leaders, their ambitions, their vices, those have consequences. And often those consequences, they ripple outward, shaping the fate of entire civilizations.
It's a lot to take in, that's for sure. But what can we, those of us living in the here and now, what can we learn from this deep dive into Commodus and Pertinax? Their reigns seem so long ago, but at the same time, incredibly relevant to the world we're living in today.
Absolutely. I think the biggest takeaway from Gibbon, at least for me, is that power, even absolute power, is much more fragile than it appears. He's asking us to look beyond just the surface, to examine the structures of power, the motivations of those in control, and how even individuals with good intentions can get caught up in a web of corruption.
It's a good reminder that these stories, they're not just ancient history. They're like a mirror reflecting back on our own world, our own societies. They make us really think about those dynamics of power, of leadership, and ask ourselves, what choices would we make if we were in their shoes? Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the intricacies of power, ambition, and the fall of empires right here on The Deep Dive.